One of the more vital parts of playing an RPG is your armor, as it prevents the squishier parts of you from becoming spilt out early, prolonging your survival. For dodge-focused combat, the armor rating isn't quite as important, but for RPGs with more direct combat, say Skyrim, armor is much more important. So what if you didn't have any clothing options? Could you survive in the wilderness of Skyrim? Well, that is what we are going to attempt today, as we will attempt to beat Skyrim without any armor. While I could walk around with clothing or rings, I want to strip down to the bare essentials, and for the run I'm not allowed at all to wear any pieces of clothing or any accessories. The reasoning is that I could apply a bunch of enchantments to my rings and necklaces, such as Fortify One Hand, and just cheese the game that way. I want to spice things up and make things a little more difficult for me. I can enchant weapons, but nothing else. And to make things even more spicy, and since Stealth Archer absolutely broke my last more potentially difficult challenge, I am banned from using any archery during the run. I want to suffer to appease my masochism, and also as usual no major glitches or companions. As for the bonus objectives, I wanted this run to be a little more on the shorter side of things since my last several runs have been pretty long all things considered. I want to see how fast I can beat the game also without using any major glitches like skipping half the game. And that's basically it. I'm going to be very much a glass cannon, which will make things interesting. With that all the way, let's get started. So when making my character, you would think I should use common sense and be an orc for berserker rage or a breton to absorb magic. However though, I am not of the common variety and I chose the Dunmer today. For one, I've never used one before, and for two, I wanted to try to make Giga Chad. However, I'm not very good at the character creator, so I make my best effort. As for the name, either you could say he is the knockoff version of Giga Chad, or describing the character's backstory, who knows. While starting the run properly, I avoid getting punished for Ronnie crimes, and I make my way through the town, ignoring the world-ending dragon. I almost went with the Stormcloaks, but decided last minute to go with Hadvar. Once I was unbound from my bindings, I immediately unbind my clothing. I considered at first using my Spark spell to blast the Stormcloaks, but since magic heavily relies on armored enchantments, something I cannot do, I immediately ruled out offensive magic for my playstyle. As for the rest of the introduction, I do have to play things carefully since the Stormcloaks are a little more threatening than the Imperials. Well, I didn't feel like playing with them, so instead I played things carefully and avoided all the enemies. While I'm not restricted in weapon, I don't fancy getting cut in two, so I booked it out of Helgen into the nice cold air. So when I went outside, instead of heading to the Standing Stones, I instead booked it to Embershard Mines. You would think I could get some weapon experience faster, but nah. I stabbed the intro bandit, and I decided at this point to become a glass cannon and dual wield for the run. I gave the bandits their just desserts and used my superior speed to weave around the heavy attacks for the most part. Before too long, I cleared out the cave, and I had to double check my difficulty settings since the bandits went down pretty easily. But then again, these are intro-friendly bandits. Inside Riverwood, I sold all the clothing I had and bought some potions and oak flesh. Since I don't have any armor, I could offset my defenses a little bit by using alteration. Well, since I don't need to prepare and get armors or the weapon of the day, I instead walked right up to Bleak Falls Barrow. I continued to plow through the bandits, taking a bit of damage, but nothing too bad at this point. Inside the burrow, the first group of bandits weren't also too bad. So I thought I could take on the bandit outlaw here, but remember, no defense. I drank a few potions and the bandit just kills me right then and there. Second attempt I used my oak flesh to mitigate some damage. Honestly, I didn't notice much of a difference, but I was playing things a little smarter. But eventually things go better and I could proceed further inside. A skeever ambushed me right before the spider and gave me ataxia, which is basically inconsequential. As for the spider, I just set it on fire behind the door, but because of my bad magic pool, I take my sweet time, and before too long the spider is nice and crispy. Once that was done, I chopped Arvel down to size, and I started on the purification of the Draugr. These guys do hit quite a bit harder than the run-of-the-mill bandits, but with good damage I could return them back to bed. Either that or backing things up. Otherwise, the remainder of the crypt wasn't too bad, I just had to play things smart for once. The restless Draugr were a bit tricky thanks to their much larger health pool, but went down easily enough. As for the Overlord at the end, thankfully the boss had to get out of bed like he has a hangover, so I could take out a good chunk of his health. A few more slashes and the quest is done. Back in Riverwood, I take everything Alvor has and I sprint my way to Whiterun, though I don't trust where the axe is resting. Along the way, I proved my mettle against an easy enough giant. Here I grabbed a lot of food for vegetable soup, and take a wild guess when I remember to craft vegetable soup. Someday I will use soup again. The guards led the suspicious nudist into town. I sold all my junk for gold, then walked into Dragon's Reach. Inside here I talked to Farengar because he can sell some good apprentice spells, and he does today. The two spells I was looking for was Mage Light, since you can power level alteration easily with it, and also Stone Flesh for more defenses. Instead of doing the main story, instead I finally get around to visiting my friendly vendor chest, money and enchanting weapons. which truth be told the chests weren't really that powerful today despite getting a lot of grand soul gems. Outside Solitude, since I want a power level alteration, I thought I could do some exploiting. After all, I can't play Skyrim without breaking the game, and also to showcase new stuff. Outside Solitude, I aim my mage light at the top of the mountain to the north, and for some reason doing this really power levels alteration, like I'm leveling up ridiculously fast. I want to rush level 50 because of the mage armor perk that buffs the flesh spells to give more defenses when you have no armor, which I feel would be mandatory for the Alduin fight. When I'm done power leveling, only takes a couple minutes all things considered. I bless the court with my presence, then I talk to Sybil since she can sell better flesh spells, but today she wasn't feeling it. So I guess I'll have to go to school. I travel to Dawnstar at this point for the Lordstone, which will help me out a lot for the run. On my way there, I flex my dominance on the Vigilance of Stendar. They love to carry a lot of potions, and plus legal murder. I might start indulging in violence here in future runs, I don't know. With that all done, I climbed the steps and gave the wolf a hug, and dominated the bandits here and be blessed by the Lord. Once that was all done, and feeling confident in my capabilities, I talked to Balgriff to get the story on track. I handed the Dragonstone immediately and headed out to fight the first dragon. Thankfully the game gives you a lot of backup for this fight, and the Lordstone begins to show its worth as a great substitute for my armor. I have to be aware of the bites, but the flames I can just tank thanks to my Dummer Blood, and it goes down pretty quickly and easily, which I'm actually very surprised. Once I informed Balgriff the man in the undie estate of the day, I took a carriage to Winterhold to get my spell shored up. Problem though is that I keep on getting spells at the gateway that is outside my mana pool. Several attempts later I get Mage Light, which I can cast, and then I enter the college. I skipped the tour and casted a ward spell so that way I can talk to Tolfdir for his long list of spells, which I get Iron Flesh and the Paralysis rune. I never use the Paralysis rune because that spell is frankly very overpowered, but good to have nevertheless. Iron Flesh though is great since I can cast that to tank more damage. With that all done, I departed Iverstead. My journey to Iverstead was thankfully pretty uneventful for the most part. The odd wolf and spider was all that I encountered. I just walked past Iverstead, only stopping at the burned down house and killed the guy here just because I can. And on my way out, the courier stopped me. Before hanging up the mountain, I got some supplies for the Greybeards. As for the climb up the steps, not much happened besides the occasional axe in the back. Further up the mountain, I fight an ice wolf, and the first round actually went down pretty well without much fuss, and the second one also went down pretty easily, which is pretty nice because they can be a pain in the butt. So in my confidence, I thought I could have a go at the Frost Troll. Take a wild guess how that went. Humbled, I just detoured around the Frost Troll, then dropped off the supplies for the Greybeards. And I never got my reward for doing it. Oh well. As for the Greybeards, the beards are grey as ever, the testing is as boring as ever, and my guy is as cold as ever. Once I got my dash attack, I headed to Usingrav. From the Lordstone, I thought I could take on the local bandit, thug, and outlaw that were nearby. I thought I could take them, and I probably could, but I get a horny bonk. Yeah, I'm on a losing streak at this point, and I'm getting pretty nervous for Alduin. So as for Usingrav, my main plan of attack for the inside is to take on the Necromancers first and foremost, just so that way I don't die. The first room gets a little dicey with the bandit thug that is here, but thankfully going right after the Necromancers I could clear out the room and get to live. The rare Orf W. Further inside, thankfully things are a bit easier, just have to take the Draugr carefully, but they go down easily enough. Deeper inside I take out the bones and grab my favorite shot for the run, then yelled my way through the gates. I did not fancy fighting the spiders, so I just ignored them and got my paper note. So with that all done and dusted, I have the need for speed, so I return to Riverwood to talk to Delphine. Before I do that, I lay into the cultists here. Yeah, they can't do much to me with the Flame Atronach, so instead they give me the prison shank treatment. I do get hurt quite a bit, but thankfully the guards here put them down for good. I also turn to my golden claw for some useless money. I talk to a pretty confused Delphine thinking I'm very drunk, and also Alvar followed me into the secret room, but thankfully it doesn't matter, and I can head out to the second dragon fight. Also, Alvar here gives me 2 acceptance to probably buy rags to give me a little bit more dignity. But you see, clothes really aren't that important. So instead of departing to Kynesgrove immediately, I instead paid a visit to Riften to totally buy some spells from the keep. Once Grelad lied dead, I visited the court wizard to see if she had anything good. Well, I saw she had telekinesis in the Arrow variant. Maybe someday I could do that. With my business in town done, I headed to Windhelm and talked to Aventus. Easy to see where this is going to go. Going after a weapon that will really help out the run. With that all done, I finally left town to head to Kynesgrove. So for the Salakanir fight. The fight was thankfully not too bad, thanks to my game plan. For the fight, I was encircling a dragon from the side, and the dragon was very keen on roasting me alive. And as a reminder, I'm a Dunmer, so that won't get you very far. Thanks to my good DPS and backup along with some good axe swings, the lizard goes back to its start nap in a pretty quick fight, and I can get started on the Thalmor Embassy. So you might already know the problem with the Thalmor Embassy. I'll have to put clothes on and immediately fail the run if I do things the intended way. So instead of doing things as intended, instead I put a bucket I found to good use and easily break into the embassy. They really need better masons if a crazy man can break through a wall with a bucket. The first Thalmor went down with ease, and Gisir was in full panic mode that Anutis took down an armored boss with ease. As for Rulindel, I got an easy sneak attack off and chopped him up to size. The Thalmor with Melbourne didn't have the keys, so I just slayed Melbourne out of frustration. So I could have warped out of the embassy and called it good. Instead, I thought I could get some more mileage out of the embassy since I sorta did sequence break things, and I walked through the main embassy. When I got to the kitchen, all the Thalmor suddenly appeared, but they went down surprisingly easily, considering my lack of defenses. I got more axe blood, then I warped out of there. I returned to Riverwood and got my doctor's note prescribing more sleep, and also talking to Delphine, and she had a free katana on the wall which will be very useful for later. With that all done, I turned to Riffin to teach the local thugs a thing about CQC as a character that's even more insane than them. I streaked on past the Thieves Guild and they rushed right to Esbern. I hopped in anticipation until Esbern let the lunatic in, and once he gathered his stuff, I plunged my axes into more Thalmor, and they are still not too bad. At this point, I'm pretty confused as to why I'm not taking more damage, and it might be because of the mage armor interacting with the Lord Stone, the Iron Flesh not dissipating since I haven't used Iron Flesh in a long time, in fact since Usengrav, or the Lord Stone just being overpowered in general. Melee attacks still hit pretty hard, but magical attacks just planked right off me. The remainder of the Ratways went pretty well enough, and before too long I'm back in Riverwood to attend the school reunion. Only 2 people showed up and that was pretty sad. Before heading to Skyhaven Temple, I took a nap and woke up in the shack. Can't strip someone who has nothing to strip. As for Astrid, she did hit pretty hard, and honestly I was close to dying at a couple points, but thankfully a banked level up saved the day. The reason why I killed her was for the Blade of Woe, which I applied to a Blade's weapon I found so I can absorb health, which is half of my game plan for Alduin. Once I was done there, I departed to Skyhaven Temple, only to give the afflicted I found in the way a helpful cure. I did not want to fight the army of similarly dressed Forsworn, so I just entered Karspire. Inside the dungeon, the Briarheart tried to roast me, but he found out the hard way that his oven does not heat past 150 and consequently was cut down to size. With the dungeon done, I proceeded to do the usuals. Solve simple puzzles the Forsworn are too dumb to figure out considering broken ovens, fail to employ safe cutting techniques, and inside Skyhaven Temple I got my piece de resistance, Dragon's Bane, aka Alduin's hard counter. Super effective to dragons and I don't have to worry about weapon triangle. So once I learned that you can talk to Esbern so he can go right to the wall instead of looking at the dust bunnies, I left the dungeon and departed to Septimus Outpost. On my way there I get my willy a little chilly, then talk to the non-dater counterpart for some keys to Aftan. After that I returned to the Tundra and I found a group of wannabe soldiers. They might be well armored, but they failed the speech check, so they paid the price. Inside Aftan I just ran on through. I could take on the drummer spiders and maybe the orbs, but once you start to factor in the lives in their parents' basement elves, suddenly things could get dangerous. So in the name of speed and more importantly my safety, I just ran on through. I laughed at gravity, ignored the Falmer, and just booked it right into Blackreach. Things went by very easily, and except for a little fall damage, I did not get hit once here. As for Blackreach, I ignored the sights and the funky mushrooms and mindlessly pressed buttons until I get my TP for my bungle. Before I head to the fight I'm dreading the most, I make a pit stop to get some potions. Well, I'm about as prepared as I can be, so I guess time to start wrapping up. I return to the boomers and get booming voices in my ears, then learn how to yell at the clouds away. I clear the fog banks and I just ignore all the frost rays here to get to the top, where I talk to party snacks about whether it's better to use single or double ply. I travel back in time to learn about mortality before Alduin. So for the Alduin fight, I played things very offensively. I applied a few poisons and some defensive potions, and the dragon kept on trying to use the magic, which thankfully I resist. My secret weapon was the Absorb Health Katana, which I could spam to keep myself healthy and do some bonus damage on the side, and then using Dragon's Bane to do effective damage. While my defense was an issue since I'm more weak physically, Alduin didn't feel like biting at my pristine body and instead used magical attacks, which is a blessing. After a minute the dragon was fell and the biggest headache was done without much fuss. Absorb Health is indeed very powerful. Before taking my 11-minute nap at the council, I instead talked to party snacks about words of power and I took the Become Ethereal buff, where if you use Become Ethereal you get a health regen, so if I need a dip from a fight I can heal up naturally. Well, I invited the children to the daycare center, and I played on my phone like a responsible babysitter while they argued and tried to go at each other. I ignored the pointless arguments, and eventually they left. I called it my carpool and left for my final job. As for Skuldolphin, I play the dungeon basically as I normally do. I spam become ethereal on the outside because I don't like fighting the dragons, and booked it inside the interior of the dungeon. Things are more calm and I'm still dealing with Restless Draugr at this point, but with my much better DPS and I can absorb vitality, they aren't much of a threat. I hack at the spiders and begin part 2 of the dungeon. Part 2 at this point, I wanted to conserve my potions as much as possible because of a certain meathead up ahead, so I just sprinted on through. Thankfully, this part of the dungeon is pretty straightforward and the Draugr Overlord gets bullied into submission. I solved the puzzle, ignoring the Nocrine cheese, and booked it outside. I don't fancy taking fireballs to the face, well, more of the wall of sparks to be honest, so instead I just departed right to the afterlife. As for Sovngarde, I wandered through the fog of war a bit until I got to Soon, who I am pretty afraid of. Glass Cannon against the Axe Splitter. I started the fight buffing my defenses, then using my swords. Sure, Soon hits pretty hard and takes about a third of my health in a single swing, but with my massive offenses, it overcomes my defense problems and soon lets me go inside the Hall of Valor. I talked to the finale carry, and then left outside for Alduin. After the drawn out shouting match was done, I shouted at the dragon and nailed it first try, which is rare for me. Alduin was still concerned about freezing my willy, which I resist with ease, so Alduin wasn't of much issue. Well, this fight is much easier in general because of 3 to 4 person backup. Eventually, he does take some bites out of me, but I just leveled up to replenish my stamina so I can spam dual attacks. The fight was pretty straightforward all things considered. I sliced and diced until the dragon was chopped up for the Elder Gods to eat, and proving that yes, you can beat Skyrim without any armor or accessories. Well, that was a very straightforward run. Honestly, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. Melee combat was more dangerous, and I was expecting to struggle a lot more, but I guess with flesh spells, mage armor, and lordstone, I could supplement the defense problem just fine. And for my level ups, I could just hard focus on my offense. I'm at least glad I went with a melee focus build, even if things were more risky for me. Also, that run only took me 3 hours, well 3.5 technically, but I had a few pauses during the run, and the timer included building the character. So yeah, that run was very fast, but to be honest, I'm down for a shorter run, and something more straightforward considering my recent run length. Hopefully you'll enjoy this run. If you like the run, be sure to drop a like, and also subscribe for more masochism. If you have any ideas on how I could torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and see you all in the next one.